And good morning, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff_2020. And this morning, I'm delighted to have an opportunity to talk with George Webb, who's out on the road en route down to South Carolina, and it's taken some time to bring us up to date. Now, before I bring him on, I want to say he's been working very, very hard and just put out a fantastic few videos recently. So make sure and check them out. Well, let me get over to my Skype feed and bring George into the show. Hang on. And hello, George Webb.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good, good. Let me turn your volume up a little bit.
Great.
And am I right? You're on the road.
That's correct.
Headed south.
Yeah, we're going to be going to South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Of course, you got the two Georgia Senate races that hold the kind of the balance of the Senate in flux there. Then, of course, we've got Aaron from my neighborhood news group heading to Atlanta. We've got Addie in Florida right now, and I'm the last point of the triangle in Myrtle Beach. So, going to be doing another book signing on Saturday, on the 5th in Myrtle Beach. So that's kind of the schedule, and we're going to be doing a whole lot of stuff in between now and then in Georgia.
Wow. You're very, very active, and as always. So, and on the road. That's what Cy Hurst told you, right? Is to either write a book or get on the road. And I guess now you're doing both.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 7 books, John, and started an 8th book, and thinking, helping Addie write a 9th book. This will be Addie's first book that he's writing with about citizen journalism that he started. And you're right. You know. Analysis is great, but you got to do collection first, as your dad, the great FBI agent McDuff, taught us all. And you have to organize the information, as he also was recommended and commended by the FBI for doing that. I'm doing a much smaller scale version than your dad, who had to combine 21 or I don't know how many different intelligence agencies at that time, probably 10 or 12. And we had a good chat about that yesterday in person, and I'm thinking about another book called McDuff's Files. It's not his sexy title, but it really does get to what's happening right now with Trump, with the president having some kind of control over the special forces.
That's the exciting part of it. I mean, so much of it is still beneath the surface, and frankly, I've gone back and forth in the past couple days, George, of like, I have confidence in Trump. I mean, and I have confidence in, the stuff that I've seen that's leading up to this being like maybe the storm or the big event. But, a couple of days of uncertainty and a little bit of seeming wavering on the part of the council, between Powell and Giuliani, made me feel a little bit less secure. But actually today I'm feeling pretty darn good. I'm liking the way things are going, and still have a great deal of confidence in the president turning this thing around. I don't understand how they're going to do it, but the fact that they are doing it seems to be ongoing, and I'm hopeful they're going to complete the restitution of our freedoms by overturning this fraudulent election.
Yeah. Well, I think the McDuff, the son, the lawyer, taught me is to be fantastic in your delivery to the jury, and then be seated. Those are the maybe the two, maybe 3 B's: be brief, be fantastic, and then be seated. And if I think Rudy Giuliani really could pick up that from you, McDuff, because sometimes brevity is the soul of winning the emotion of the day. And he had one of those brilliant moments where he said, this was in Gettysburg a couple of days ago, that he was talking to the Pennsylvania state legislature, And he said, look, you guys sent out 1.8 million mail-in ballots. You received 1.4 million mail-in ballots. You counted and reported on the web and officially 2.6 million mail-in ballots. So where did the other 800,000 ballots come from? And, you know, if you guys can't possibly certify this election until you tell me where those 800,000 ballots come from. I think, and then he goes into 3.5 hours of drips and drabs of 20,000 votes here and 10,000 votes there and all the anecdotal stuff. But I like that big Duff, come in, be bold, be fantastic, be seated, and just say, boom, you know. Now, I'm sure they had to read a lot of stuff into the record, and he probably didn't have the Southern gentleman flair. You know, he didn't have the allowances that you would have as you, you know, oil your way around a courtroom. But I really think Rudy could pick up a few tips from you.
Well, George, you're too kind. I will make a few comments on what I saw at that hearing, and I didn't see a lot of it. The reason that I didn't see a lot of it was because the audio was bad, and
Yep.
the people's, you know, the things they were saying were across the room from wherever the mic was, so there was all this room echo and everything. Well, it's hard. It's hard to listen to that, and so that raises the question. What you just touched upon is that they don't have the resources, you know, of a Baker and Hostetler, or of a huge law firm that can just snap their fingers and have the most perfect production studio just suddenly appear anywhere. That's a sign to me of genuineness, of honesty, of doing the best they can. But even if you can't, you know, do it beautifully, you get it done. And that was what they were doing, was to just get all of this testimony on the record, get
Yep.
people under oath, take their testimony, and then that shifts the burden of proof over to the other side. When they've got enough affidavits that any reasonable judge is going to throw out the election, then the pressure is moved off of their shoulders over the burden of proof. I think shifts in the public mind over to the Biden team to defend against all this stuff. The big problem, of course, being that the Biden team still controls the media. So that's where you come in. You are George. I have to just tell you, I've been thinking about it all day. It is such an honor to work with you, and I stand by you 1,000%. And anything I can ever do to support you, and you know that I consider your work to be crucial to the revival of our country, and nothing less than that. So bravo to you, George.
Well, it's great to have a good teacher such as yourself, and specifically, you know, I want to get into the colonial nature of this, the colonial history nature that you showed me a lot of these colonial spots around Maryland, and I remember you taking me up to the place at Fort Tobacco and showing me the escape route of John Wilkes Booth and showing me these different spy routes and so forth. But there was a intelligence network both in the Civil War, where you took me at Fort Tobacco, and in the Revolutionary War. Okay, and that network was the only thing we had, and maybe the only thing the Confederates had against their oppressor, in their mind of their oppressor. Well, this sort of citizen journalism is the same network. It's the same kind of network. It's an intelligence network. We do it in the open because we still have some freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But that's what we're building. We're building it openly. There's a lot of people who want to be a single person, right? And they want their show. You know, it's going to be this show, and it's me, and give me Patreon and all this sort of thing. And that doesn't win the race. The way Washington won the Revolutionary War was through a spy network. The way the Confederates kept in the game for as long as they did is they had a hell of a spy network. And a lot of times, I think these things, like you said, John, are tried in the court of public opinion long before they ever get a chance to see a gavel or a judge. So, we're building out right now, South Carolina. We're going to go to Denver. After that, we've got a sort of a network hub in San Diego. The person there well, and we've got obviously Cobb Island covered, Mystery Island covered, and we now have Michigan. So we're going to build these centers where people can come, learn how to do this, learn how to go back to their own homes and build this out, so that we'll have a network anywhere we go. Anywhere there's trouble, it'll be like the Minutemen that you talk about a lot in your colonial history teachings, that we can all go to each other's aid, rather than it always being the FBI versus George Webb, or always being the CIA versus, Robin Gritz, or you get the idea that there will be a support network that will come to the aid of these different people, rather than everybody having to go it alone all the time.
It really is spreading. I was thinking how many states we have great contacts in that you have yet to visit, such as Oregon, for instance, and Washington State. Maybe you'll get up that way sometime. And maybe I could go with you. The other thing that I would propose to you, right? And I didn't. I'm springing this on you now, but it seems to me, George, what might be helpful, since we haven't ever really completed our charrette about Macduff, would be to have a Macduff charrette, perhaps this spring sometime, and have it here at Mystery Island. So, because I need help putting together all the different research threads that people like David Underdown and so many others have offered to me, and to collate these folks, and once again to try to put together a comprehensive understanding of all of these various important aspects of what we've found in the past 2.5, 3 years.
Well, I'll just go ahead and second that emotion and just say we'll have a pre-charrette, and it'll start in about 4 hours. And we're going to go to South Carolina. We're going to dedicate our time there now to Macduff folks. If people want to come down to Myrtle Beach, we've got Wes is obviously down there. We got a kind of a center of concentration there. I'll spend between now and Saturday, when I'm not doing the news with Georgia, on the Macduff files, because I do think, John, I wouldn't be doing this. It's not just my friendship with you. It's not just the fact we're on YouTube. It's the fact I'm convinced this is the key to unlocking the deep state. If you get their encryption, if you get their network, if you get the Macduff files and figure out the files, you win. It's kind of like, these games where like different code, the Da Vinci Code and so forth. You can have all the resources, all the king's horses, all the king's men. If you don't have the king's codes, you're not going to win. And that's what we need. And I'm convinced Macduff was onto this, reusing these special access programs that were supposed to be for killing Castro, and then repurposing them and killing Kennedy with it. And there is a chance, John, if you look at how these special access programs were kind of running around the Pentagon until Richard Nixon kind of brought them to the surface. This is a way of compartmentalizing things and keeping secrets. There is a chance they're still using the same special access programs that they had for killing Castro and Kennedy.
That's interesting too. Well, you and I, when we first met, I think there was some presence that just let us know that my father's spirit is here to help us and can help the country still by us just learning more about what his context was, what the who was against him, who, if anybody, was for him. And I think that's an interesting question there too, because the people that would have given him that special forces ring, the Star Sapphire ring, they were certainly fans of his, but they're people that couldn't possibly surface right now. And most of the people that would have supported what he did in the TDY mission, for example, they're never going to be able to talk. And so it's like there's a whole lot of support beneath the surface for McDuff, and as his story is told, the story of how these criminals have taken over our country's assets and used them to profit, as you've shown so well in your investigations.
Well, John, you hit on something very good here, which is we talked yesterday about, or maybe the day before, your books being destroyed. And why would you go after somebody with 3,000 or 4,000? Oh, I'm sorry, you had 11, 12,000 subscribers, but still, Brett Baer, gets 1 million. Hannity gets 3 million. Why would you go after that? It's because that's the guy who's doing the digging. If you look at how these top secret programs are put together and how you can repurpose them for ill purposes, like Bay of Pigs, for instance, right? You start with Roosevelt, who comes up with the 3 classifications, the top one being secret. And then a few years later, Truman adds top secret, okay? That's the one we all know from the spy thrillers and so forth. But then Eisenhower in 53 comes back and says, hey, wait a minute here. You guys have way overclassified everything, and you're doing stuff in the military-industrial complex here that I can't see. So he ends up trying to declassify a lot of these special access programs or declassify a lot of these top secret machinations that are happening out of his eyes. And then the Pentagon in response, or the CIA in response, creates these special access programs as a workaround, as a loophole. And it's not until Kissinger gets in the White House that they finally admit that there is such a thing as special access programs. And see, this is why I looked to McDuff, because the only guy who had figured out Kissinger being kind of a foreign agent, working for somebody. He's working for somebody outside the United States. We don't know who. It could be Israel, could be the Crown, it could be, we don't care. He has allegiances somewhere else. He was the only guy who is in this setup that knows this thing and seems to recognize the special access program loophole. So that's why I'm so keyed in on it, because I say they've reused this thing over and over and over. They took the programs out of Vietnam that Kissinger started, and then you can just reuse them for Iran-Contra and everything else. Kosovo, Bosnia, etc.
And I was just reading the other night that it was, in fact, Kissinger that was really overseeing the whole Vietnam War in the first place, that he was standing behind the scenes. So my father would have been one of the pawns on his chessboard, and so many others that, he just, as Churchill famously said, the soldiers are just pawns on our board for us to use as we will. So that's right. And people that think Kissinger's not an important figure anymore, I just strongly disagree. He's the heir of the Allen Dulles and Richard Bissell, whatever you want to call it.
The legacy, yeah. It's a secret team legacy, and David Petraeus is his close henchman, responsible for all these things. John, Bosnia, Kosovo. You go right into the Iraq War. Then that 20-year war. You've got the Arab Spring and all those topples. And then you're right into now. They're still going. The Afghan bilking operation's still going. The Iraq bilking operation's still going. It's no wonder that the people who tried to hack our elections with Dominion voting, it's no wonder that they are direct descendants from Kissinger's program with KKNR, with David Petraeus in Serbia. It was established in 1999, OTPOR, OTPOR. What do? Flip elections, color revolutions, election engineering, election flipping. So it all comes back to roost, and it's such an easy roadmap to read once you have the McDuffs to lay it out for you. McDuff figured out early on in his recommendations, right, with Hoover, we got to collate all these files. We got to bring all these files together, Because if everybody has their own secret files, that allows secret teams.
Well, that was the theory of SACSA in the first place, was to bring all of them under the same, well, I don't want to say umbrella, but under the same leadership. And that's why when I first started doing this work, it was when I realized that my father wasn't just a functionary. He was at the top of the pyramid of special ops planning for all the services, everything from 1962 until he died in 71. So everything that happened from Sante to TDY to all of this stuff was him, and it was Kissinger playing chess against him.
Yeah.
And that decade is exploring that decade of Kissinger probably playing cat and mouse with my father, trying to force him to do what he wanted to do instead of my father doing what was right for America. That is a story that's not been told yet, and wow, what a story. And I think you're the man to tell it.
Yeah, well, and I'm digging hard on this McDuff files thing, because there's these three types of SAPs, and I don't mean to go down this rat hole, other than this is the loophole that's causing, I believe, people to lose control of their country. These are the secret programs that Fletcher Prouty talked about in Secret Team, another great book that you did that was wiped out. But we're gonna tell everybody about a plan to recover all those things in a minute.
Okay.
But there was one is an acquisition SAP for people like defense contractors. So there would have been a need to be a McDuff type team to review all the defense clearances, which we know McDuff had a 70-man team to do that. But then there's also intelligence SAPs for planning, operational planning. We know your father was involved in operational planning. And the third is the actual execution, the operations SAPs. This would be the Operation Mongoose, which was to kill Castro. And the people running the Operation Mongoose, it's only mongoosers inside that enclave that can communicate with each other. The idea of a SAP, it's a walled garden that only the people involved in that operation. And the reason for that is if somebody gets captured, you don't want him telling about every other operation. You just want him to know just enough to execute that operation, sort of like TDY does a great job of explaining this SAPs with your dad in that role. But the key here is McDuff certainly would have known about these SAPs. Now, John, I'm going to tell you something. I know I've said it a couple of times, and it gets in the weeds, but there's two types of SAPs, believe it or not, as far as the Congress goes. You say, where's the oversight? There's acknowledged SAPs, and the unbelievable part is there's also something called unacknowledged SAPs, which means these are special programs that the Congress doesn't know about. They only have to communicate verbally to the two leaders of the three key intelligence committees, Foreign Affairs Intelligence Committee, verbally to the ranking member and to the majority member. And you can always have Adam Schiff just approve it verbally, whatever you're going to do, election operations against Trump, sure, why not? Let's have Otpor do that. And then there's supposed to be a ranking member on the opposition that's informed of these things, right? So this has got to be the way they're doing it. It has to be covert. It has to be encrypted. It's got to be through these unacknowledged SAPs. And I'll even go one further. If that doesn't blow your mind, that Congress doesn't have any oversight on these things, like they're supposed to. The Congress never intended, it was a Continental Congress Army. Congress never intended not to have the purse strings of the Army. There's also a thing called waived SAPs, which means Congress, even the people that are supposed to be informed, that leading the committees, if they leave the Congress, they waive the need to tell the next person who takes their seat in Congress about these secret programs. The secret team, and this is what I love about your book so much, John, because you built so much foundation for me. The secret teams cannot just go around and communicate secretly when we have the NSA and so forth, people looking for this. They have to have also special access programs, these secret programs. And this is what I'm convinced McDuff was just right on the money on. He knew how the system worked. He knew how the system was being worked, and he tried to stop it, and Kissinger stopped him eventually.
Well, that sure is. That's a heavy story, and it fits in with the evidence that I have. So, sounds good. I mean, it sounds like you got a book going there, George. You
I
really
do.
Hey, I want to mention also, in thinking about what you just said about the NSA and how the National Security Act of 1947 and the creation of the CIA worked together to enable Allen Dulles and his successors up to the people we're dealing with now to evade the supervision of the president and operate these special programs, SAPs, of communication, of planning, and of action. As we described, from exactly as you said, if something works, they're going to repeat it. And so we really do need to acknowledge that it's Doug Valentine who wrote the book, The Phoenix Program, and in his very famous words said, the question is, what will happen when Phoenix comes home to roost? And what we're seeing now is that these programs that have been used to manipulate and destroy families and communities and civilizations around the world are now being used against the American people. And Doug Valentine has exposed that in his great books. And when we mentioned TDY a little while ago, we need to acknowledge his wonderful writing and his authorship of that book, which right here on my show less than a year ago, we were interviewing him, and we both realized at the same time that one of the men in his book was my dad.
Yeah.
And it was the character of Hammer. And so I have to say, folks, if you haven't read TDY by Doug Valentine, get a copy of it from him or from Amazon, and you can, yeah, I'll tell you, it's an amazing story. Well, so Doug Valentine has done a lot of the legwork, and all of these other authors. George, as you mentioned, I'm rebuilding my library of audio, video presentations of these important books. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have a special review of Crimes of Patriots by Jonathan Whitney. And now that book tells us all about the CIA's Nugan-Hand Bank, Leroy Manor, William Colby, and Mitch Werbel, the people that worked on the Hallowell Plan and the Castle Bank in the Caribbean. All of this was exposed by Jonathan Whitney in that great book, which I read about a year ago, called Crimes of Patriots. So I'm going to be, every Wednesday night, George, I'm going to be featuring one of my book train books. And you know the book train is on screamingospreys.com, so take a look there. We are refilling our content rapidly, as fast as we can. And I have to thank you, George, for that great compilation you just did for me to get the ball rolling with some reason compilations. And you concentrated on the secret team and the portions I read about Saxa.
Yeah, and John, I think it's funny how I remember where I was when I was hearing that book. It's kind of like people remembering where they were when they heard a first song for the first time. I remember when you were reading, the Nugan-Hand Bank and Castle Bank and Bishop Baldwin Bank and
right.
All these special forces guys in the getting in Vietnam into the opium business and laundering all this money first through Australia, then through the Hawaii Bank, and then through the Caribbean Bank. I mean, it's bad seed. There's a bad threat here in the Special Forces, where I'm almost to Fayetteville here, to the headquarters here of the Joint Special Operations Command. There is a bad seed, and we know now that McDuff was going after that bad seed. With TDY, we know that McDuff was aiming at that bad seed. So would he also be smart enough? He was going in an operational plan there, but would he be also smart enough, and I know he was, to go after the intelligence and planning SAPs that put those things into motion? And I say he is. And so we're going to be digging. I keep getting things from the archives, John, on all my FOIA requests for your dad's information from the Joint Chiefs. They keep telling me they can't go back to the paper because of COVID-19 and all this. And you mentioned Doug talking, Doug Valentine talking about the Phoenix program and bringing it home. I think that's all that, other than testing chemical and biological weapons and different surveillance technology for DARPA, that's all that Vietnam proved, was how to do counterinsurgency against your own population, low intensity warfare. And I think they've perfected it using electronics now. Everything with COVID drives in the direction of more electronic touch points for you. You're going to order everything electronically. You're going to use your credit card for everything. We're going to pull the change out of the market. We're going to pull the dollar, the big denomination dollar bills. Then we're going to pull all the dollar bills. You can have a digital wallet. You need to get tested. All this stuff with the 5G towers they're rolling out everywhere right now. All this stuff is gradually tightening the noose, the electronic noose on every person in America. And this is why people even who don't like Trump, Doug Valentine is not a big Trump fan, but he is doing something critically important to try to keep some kind of liberty in our country, in our freedoms.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And politics is politics. Let's just leave it out of it. Let's do whatever we can together to restore our freedoms. I think, on one side you might call it populists, and on the other side you might call it progressives, but there's so much common ground there that to get hung up over this election the way we have, that just fits in with the plans of the bankers to run everything through what Harley Schlanger and the LaRouche folks are calling a banking dictatorship. That's where this thing is headed unless we stop it. So, I think President Trump is doing amazing things. We may see the light of day yet at the end of this tunnel.
Well, I think there could be a couple of things in terms of declassifications that I've seen in Sidney Powell's. She's just, we've just gotten brief glints of this, but she did talk about Serbia a little bit, not as much as I would like, but she did kind of start reaching in to China, some of these IP addresses in China. They didn't print the Pakistani IP addresses. IP addresses are internet protocol addresses that allow hacking to occur. So these would map actually physically back to the places where the hacking centers were. But then she did print a map in her Michigan pleading of the intelligence center in the port of Karachi called Bolton Square in her pleading. So maybe there's a Mike Flynn who's sprinkling a little bit of intelligence in there to tell Trump where the hacking actually occurred. Maybe the whole Venezuela thing was a smokescreen, because I knew Dominion didn't have any people in Venezuela. So I'm not saying Otpor didn't flip, or Otpor then Canvas then Dominion didn't flip the election in. They didn't do election flipping, but that's not their headquarters. And maybe she was just doing that as a smokescreen.
We just don't know yet, but I'm going to spend my day today believing that President Trump is reelected, and there's going to be some celebrating at some point. When all of this drama is over in January, and I don't think we're going to erupt in any type of a conflict. I think, whatever happens, it'll be a peaceful transition. But, and we also have a lot of work to do in what I think is the weakest part of our democracy right now, George, and that is the relationship between the people and their representatives in Congress. That relationship has got to be reformed and strengthened. and I would even consider diluting Congress by a great deal to maybe even, get back to 25,000 persons or 35,000 or maybe even 100,000. But the size of the congressional districts right now is so conducive to a separation of the people's needs from the elite's plans that the Congress has been taken away from its primary duty, and that is to represent the constituents of their districts.
Yeah, interesting. I know Congress not always had 435. I don't believe they started with 435 in the early days. I thought it was a little more close to the Senate numbers. I might be wrong on that. I could be completely wrong. It's always had 435.
No,
I'm trying to think.
No, it's been like it was each congressperson, one congressperson for 25,000 people was my recollection of how the Constitution started, and then there came a time toward around the end of the 1800s when they decided, hey, we can't do that anymore, so they changed it to allow districts to have any size. And that was how they limited it to 435 instead of having it grow to, a couple thousand members of the House of Representatives, which they thought was going to be completely unwieldy. I don't think it's unwieldy anymore. That's what I'm saying. I think with computers and with a lot more direct democracy, and this is one of the things that you hear on the liberal side of the progressive side, is we need more direct democracy. That, I think, is true. We need to have a way for the citizens to have a voice in their government, and then to have that voice expressed in the Congress through a truly loyal representative that's not there to just sell more arms and weapons.
Right. It's funny, John. I like the idea a little bit about the 25,000. As long as the voting, we can come about some kind of voting system that isn't hacked. If it was 25,000 instead of 800,000 like it is now, you could easily imagine a Jason Chaffetz, let's say, going down to a town square in his most populous city in his district, and just having a vote where everybody puts their votes into a big plastic clear bag, in envelopes, and maybe 3 or 4 of those ballot centers, 5,000 ballots, and everybody watches everybody vote, and you open the votes and you film the votes being opened, and that's how that 25,000 person congressional. I mean, that would be the only way. See, John, how do you restore the confidence?
That's how you kill the F-35, George.
Yeah.
You eventually pick it apart with, my district didn't get any, and the way that they've got it set up now is that everybody gets a certain amount of pork, depending upon what their seniority is and whether they've gone along in the past with the plan. So this is my idea, is that it is in the Constitution that the Congress is the superior branch, and the Congress has to be in charge of our laws. That's why we have a Congress, is so that the people, through their representatives, govern themselves. If we don't do it through Congress, then the financial interests are going to do it through the back door, as we've been subject to for our entire lives, George.
Yeah. Well, people have a hard time believing that the defense industry is seating both sides of the Congress. They think, well, people lean one way or the other, but just turn it into something like somebody who made signs. Let's say you made signs for a living, and you were getting a whole bunch of orders from the Biden people for the Biden signs and a whole bunch of orders from the Trump people for Trump signs. Do you care, which side, that you're making the sign for? You might have a Trump sign company and a Biden sign company in the other half of the building, but you don't care. It's the same way with arms manufacturers. You don't care if they're Republican weapons or if they're Democratic weapons. You just care that there's a majority in the House that votes the national authorization bill through. That's another thing, John. I think that your idea of fractionalizing these things with the defense authorization. If you've actually sat in Congress ever, in the Senate, which I did for 18 hours one time, to watch the Senate, the defense authorization go through, NDAA, they do it in the middle of the night. They have one speaker say one thing, one senator say one thing for like 3 minutes, and then they have another hour break, make sure that, the reporters get tired, and then they have another senator talk for 5 minutes on the other side, and then another hour break. And they make it so that the gallery is completely empty by the time the thing passes in the middle of the night. And it's a huge percentage of the bill, $800 billion, right?
That sounds like the elections in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, or Michigan, or Georgia. Just wait till everybody goes home, and then we'll vote for who we want to vote for. But I like your idea, John, with the Congress, if nothing other than to restore confidence in elections, because they did a similar thing that you're mentioning in Brexit. They had different communities vote, and they all voted together in a clear plastic bag, and they carried that. Literally, they had a camera following the votes to the counting table and counted them out, and that's why I think Brexit won and was not hackable, because it was paper ballots and it was a record. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a real distrust even on the Democratic side. Their Trump derangement syndrome has them so vehemently hating Trump that they will take anything. They would murder Melania, right, to get rid of Trump, right? So they've gone over the cliff as far as morality, right, in a lot of cases, because they're so deranged. But I do think that they want fair elections too. They don't want hacked elections, and it's going to come around against them one of these times. And I think if we had more of a Brexit type system, people would, at least be confident in the vote. Otherwise, why vote?
Yeah, and paper ballots is the way to go. George, one of the things I remember about my dad was how important it was to keep records, to keep accurate records, and he would never, ever have given up his file cabinets. He would never have turned his paper into digital memory sticks, He would be appalled that anybody would depend upon a computer to secure their records. And so if he were alive now, he'd probably have a warehouse full of file cabinets with everything he ever wrote, everything that he ever received, copied and categorized. And that, I think, is something that they use, again, to their benefit. I think we've lost George on the phone. Let's see if we get him back. Hang on.
No.
Oh, you're still there. But anyway,
John?
it's just that's just one thing about my dad that I think everybody can agree on, that computers are not trustworthy. Hello?
Now, can I follow up on that? Because this is where I go with what I was mentioning to you about Oswald and Ruby. We know McDuff investigated Oswald and Ruby from the DOD side, from DOD. His report to Sullivan was from the DOD side, right, after he'd moved over. But go back to April 1961. You're Kennedy. You're this Navy guy. You're this Irishman. Then you find out these CIA guys have all run this Bay of Pigs behind your back, this covert operation, and you didn't get informed until the 11th hour, and you had to make all these snap decisions to try to make you look bad. Who do you bring in if you're going to do another? We know they're going to try. Kennedy was thinking about another invasion of Cuba, only a more conventional. Who would you bring in? Would you bring in a big, smart lawyer, tough guy, Irishman, who worked for Hoover, who had all the national intelligence files, knew where all the bones were buried? Would you bring him in to get to the bottom of how Bay of Pigs started? So all the indications, and he comes over, I believe, in April of '62, and Fletcher Prouty is just kind of leaving Sachs at that point.
Yeah, I checked that out just for the record. They overlapped for at least a year, so they definitely would have known each other.
So your dad, with the filing system, would have been the guy to be able to go into Operation Mongoose and figure out, and maybe Mongoose happened a little bit later, I say mongoose until I figure out another operation. It could be North Woods or something like that. But one of those operations, they could look in and see who was involved. We know all the names, and we're going to know all the names. It's going to be Bissell. It's going to be Howard Hunt. It's going to be, Ted, what's his face, Shackley. It's going to be all the names. Cofer Black is his assistant. We're going to know all the names. But here's the guy. Kennedy had to have some feedback on who to fire, and who to bring in. He's completely surrounded. The secret team is completely surrounded. But George Bundy, for crying out loud, is getting a CIA check at the same time he's the chief of Kennedy's National Security Council. So, so he fires him, or if he fires Dulles or retires Dulles and brings in McCone, who Kennedy trusted as a businessman. So I think there's a real area of intrigue here. And I think this is the secret to the secret team. The secret program is the secure special access program. And I think your dad was on top of it. And that's where I'm putting all my effort, because everything's going to come out of that. No matter what kind of operations being done against the people in the United States, you have to use an SAP. It's Dmitry Alperovich's little key. You have to have a walled garden, an enclave, a conclave. And your dad certainly was given the task by Kennedy to punch into that and find out who the hell did this. The reason why, and the facts I have to back that up, the proof I have to back that up, is there's the big raid. In '62, Kennedy was considering another invasion, a 260,000 person invasion. Mm-hmm. That got shelved because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. They found, oh shit, this could trigger World War III. I think Bissell, maybe doctored some photos to stop that, but of some missile sites. But then in '63, the cabal is at it again. The cabal is at it again, and an FBI raid happens in July of 1963, with one Lee Harvey Oswald as the pilot, flying explosives to these guys at the Lacombe, Lacome, training base near Lake Pontchartrain. And you have one Jack Ruby as the gun runner, and you have two guys down on 555 Camp Street in New Orleans by the name of Guy Bannister and Clay Shaw that are in the little secret team. And your dad was investigating half of that secret team. And I say the other half he knew. He knew Bannister was FBI, then turned CIA, and he knew Shaw was CIA all the way. And he got to the bottom of this. And you can't kill him, but what's the first thing that happens when he gets there? He comes down with that horrible hepatitis and is knocked out. And that lets them get to the files.
I think you're onto it. I would emphasize also, as you look through his career, don't neglect the fact that he was there from 1951 to 1961 at the FBI, where he saw all of this stuff developing. He was obviously a Hoover favorite and go-to guy. So what he saw happening is the defection of FBI agent after FBI agent as the CIA reached out and grabbed the talent, especially in South America. So that's one. Bannister is an example of that, of what he would have seen, that, oh, these guys are flipped. They've gone over to the CIA, and that would have been obvious to him.
Yeah, and I'm really looking now. I'm getting stymied by the National Archives, but there are people that were in the different sections in Division 5 in the Washington Field Office where your dad was. Division 5 was the counterintelligence group. There's different desks as somebody gave you a phone book. Yeah.
Sections. And I found that it
sections.
Has. I just came on it on the internet. Sections, and there was the Russian section, in which he was clearly a part of, and then there was a section dedicated to liaison with other agencies, and that also I think he was part of. There was other sections too, about 10 of them, and Sullivan was at the top of the counterinsurgency section.
Yeah. Well, and so what I'm trying to do is find other McDuffs like your dad. You're the sons of these people,
Hmm.
or the daughters of these people
Oh
who
yeah.
could say, oh yeah, I know that one, I know that one, because see, your dad's always going out to that little bowling alley in Virginia or wherever they used to meet, a restaurant I think it was, gone now, but meeting with these CIA guys every once in a while, and I'm like, that's got to be special activities.
Yeah.
That's got to be them getting Hoover's blessing on this stuff before he goes over to Kennedy. When he's with the FBI, was he meeting with those CIA guys when he was with the FBI? Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm thinking, hey, Guatemala 54. Hoover wants somebody's eyes to fall on it that's got some military background and make sure everything's on the up and up. Who are you going to send if you're Hoover? Are you going to send MacArthur's man, or are you going to send somebody who's never, you know, uh, done this before? So there's a lot of angles to follow here, but one thing's for sure: McDuff knows about special access programs. He knows how the tools of the trade of the secret teams from 51 into 61, and then from 61 to 71 with Saxa. So it's going to be fun as we go to the archives, because we don't, with that phone book now, we don't just have McDuff. I actually did a FOIA on all those names.
Mm.
And I found somebody else, some other journalist had done a FOIA already, and they had knocked it back because it was too comprehensive. It was like all 80 names in the phone book.
Okay.
So, and it was, it was kind of like you're fishing kind of thing. So I'm going to try to get more information about just a few of those people and get a couple of threads going, and then try to get those requests back, and then put the pieces of the puzzle together, maybe, by tunneling, Swiss cheesing this thing. But it is a fascinating thing, because it is the same thing I think that's going on now. Whoever ran the election operations, the OPTOR election operations, I say it was the same operation that Petraeus has been using since Libya, since a couple of people told me that it was, but we'll leave it as it may. People don't believe the BlackBerry story, that's fine.
Well,
But go ahead.
Yeah, let me, before I lose this thought, and my brain is tenuous right now. The connection is from Saxa with Leroy Manor,
Yep.
Sante to Desert One, in which Leroy Manor does the after-action report. McMaster, who comes in and writes the book Special Ops, in which he praises both of Manor's previous write-ups, that basically said these operations didn't work, but they were great successes because of X, Y, and Z. Mainly, we showed the North Vietnamese that we could do it, right? The Sante, and in the Iran, I don't remember how they papered that mess over, but when the helicopters crashed in the disaster at Desert One, trying to rescue the hostages in the Iran hostage crisis, that was also, I can't remember how, associated with McMaster, but then McMaster then is now running the COVID response in the Northeast out of Boston, and when you connect that with his intelligence background, I think you go right straight into Petraeus. And so there's a connection directly from my dad at Saxa. If you follow right through that chain, you get right to where you just left off.
Yeah, and do you mean McCraven, or you're talking about McMaster's special ops book? Because McCraven.
I'm sorry, I mean McCraven.
McRaven. Yeah. I knew what you meant, McRaven.
I'm sorry. That's right.
Yeah. McRaven connects the dots between your dad and Petraeus. And Petraeus, now McRaven, there's a couple of other pieces in there. General Shelton, with Petraeus, be as the chief of staff of General Shelton. General Shelton is the one who starts the JSOC. It's funny because I'm a mile away from his statue here. And that whole idea of JSOC reporting to the CIA in actual fact, rather than reporting to the FBI. And it's when it flips from Saxa, the whole idea of Saxa, from 61 to 71, it's around which is the idea that the president should control it. Your dad dies, and with it dies the idea that the special forces report to the president. From then on, you have the special forces with the latter stages of Vietnam reporting directly to the joint, to people in the Joint Chiefs getting a CIA paycheck. And that is a very interesting time in history. And of course, they're going to hire their own authors. They have unlimited budget. They're going to say, we were incredible. This was incredibly patriotic. Let's buy another 1,000 flags to adorn our statues. But tell me at what point Trump was clued in on this. And here's an interesting thing, John. Some people say, and there's some evidence to support this, that Flynn, knowing the background of all this, is sprinkling this intelligence of what really happened into Trump, and Trump is using the briefings, the national security briefings to the Biden transition team as a way of giving him a big chill, basically saying, hey, we know what happened in China, we know what happened in Pakistan. I don't like these long shots, where you've already lost the election to an election operation, and now, Flynn is actually waiting for after that for even a longer shot. I don't trust those stories, but I do think Mike Flynn just gave a big interview. I think Flynn should come out and say, look, if you think, I heard him just say it 2 days ago, if you think Trump won with over 400 electoral votes, tell us how they did it. In your estimation, what do you think happened? And even though it might be classified because it's an SAP, I think he still has a responsibility as a patriot and a general to come forward.
Of course he does. And when he got his pardon, I expect that he made some commitments to the president that will be helpful to the president's re-election.
Yeah, or at least, some people say exoneration because Trump may have been trapped in some kind of perjury trap or something. But I just think if General Flynn could come forward and say, hey, these Blackberries that are running all around started in 1999 in Kosovo, and Petraeus dumped them there because he was General Shelton's errand boy at that time. He was the chief of staff, and they've been around for 20 years because all these people are in the same SAP. They're all in the same walled garden. That's why these Blackberries seem to move around. If you look at it, they move around with all the conflicts. Just like a bag of guns that a robbery team would have. They wouldn't have all the guns at each of their houses. They would have it at one guy's house. They would all go meet at the hideout, and then the guy would bring over the bag, and then they would go do the job, and they all put the guns back in the bag. That's what the same thing it looks like with the Imran Awan bag of Blackberries. They're for covert actions. They're not for use every day. Nobody uses a Blackberry every day. But it does show you that they were used for covert actions. And we can trace this from Libya, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, Iran nuclear deal, you name it. Just seems these Blackberries are already there, always there.
It certainly is always about the secret communications, the SAPs, and it goes back, to the church, to the Jesuits, and to the ancient Roman Empire. That the way to win is to have the best communications. And you mentioned today about the Confederate line of communication. It ran right through this area, right across the river where the Potomac River Bridge is now. And it's fascinating to think about the old families of Southern Maryland when we stood there on the hill in Port Tobacco by the graves of the Confederate patriots, including a spy by the name of Olivia Floyd, who ran the communications between the Maryland side, and with a pair of lanterns in her window would signal to the Confederates on the Virginia side whether it was safe to cross the river in their small, swift rowboats. And that was part of the secret communications of the Confederacy that ran all the way from Montreal down to Richmond. So that part of it is part of our history too, right here around Mystery Island. And I look forward to going around there again with you sometime when you get back here after your many travels, George. What else?
One question.
Yeah, go ahead.
One question, yeah. Well, now you got me started asking you a question, but I was pretty sure that the Union in the Civil War controlled. We both live on the Potomac, so this is a Potomac question. That the Union controlled the Potomac with the gunboats pretty much from day one in the war because the Navy was loyal. There's obviously that one guy who became the Confederate master.
You're talking
Admiral
about Sims.
Sims, right? Raphael Sims. But I thought that the Confederates pretty quickly retreated behind the Rappahannock, and because the Rappahannock was a small enough river that the Union gunboats couldn't come down, but yet it was a big enough barrier, defensive barrier. And I didn't know if I was thinking about, I was in Port Royal earlier today, and Prince George or King George, yeah. Was that the Confederate line there? Do you know?
Well, you've got it, but you've compressed it too much because it took almost 2 years for the Yankees to control the Potomac River.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
and right there where the bridge landing is, where the Dahlgren Fort is now, there was a Confederate battery there that actually was effective in stopping shipping up to Washington, D.C. and to Alexandria when they wanted to, of course. But they did control the Potomac with artillery for some time, and they had a small flotilla of small boats that they were using, and occasionally somebody would go out and steal a steamboat, or such as the famous Zarvona, whose story I'll tell another time. Another Southern Marylander who became very famous in the Civil War for some spy activity, and I don't know if you want me to tell it now because we're at the end of the show, but I think you're probably tantalized if you don't know about Zarvona, right?
Yeah, no, I don't know about it. So I know there's a Zarboni machine, that's an ice machine.
No, not that.
So, I know that's not right, but that's a great teaser for the next show, John.
Zarvona with a V, if anybody wants to look him up. He did a little cross-dressing, and by virtue of his cross-dressing was able to do some interesting espionage, including taking over a steamer.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up in prison at Fort McHenry, the famous Fort McHenry of War of 1812 fame, became a place where Zarvona, after he was captured, was held for the rest of the war. And
Wow.
tragic story on all sides, but one worth telling.
Yeah.
Well, you're almost to the museum there, and I know you probably don't have time, but one day when you're going by there, go inside and see if you can see the big Sante Raider's knife that I will assert without any concrete proof, but just because I know the circumstances, I will tell you that my dad designed that knife. And there's a great big machete-like knife there in the museum, which I've never seen, but it was one of the special equipment things that were created for the Sante raid.
Well, John, last time we came through was Monday. The museum was closed. It's Tuesday now, so I'm going in, and I'm gonna find that damn knife, and I'll shoot you a picture, and you can post it on your screamingospreys.com.
Oh, that's so great. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks, George.
All right. Thank you, John.
All right. Bye now. Thanks, everybody. We will check back in with you later, and maybe we'll get a picture of that famous big Sante Raiders knife.